Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and I'm so distracted already. This is going to be a good episode, I can tell. So a little behind the scenes. All right. Going to derail the show immediately off the bat. The way I record is I've got my GarageBand open, and so I see the sound waves as they are being recorded, and it's just right in front of my face the entire time, just so I can make sure that my levels are always good, that I'm not, over modulating, and that the sound stays consistent. The problem is that, I come in hot with the intro, super hot, a lot of energy. And then I feel like I don't get that much softer. Like I still feel like I am projecting the same amount, but then I watch as the levels get smaller. Like I'm talking at a lower level like this, but I'm using the same level of voice. And so then I try to project even more, and the levels don't go up all the way. They go up a little bit. So anyway, I get very distracted by that. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I could have gone without telling you all of that, but I didn't. We're 190 episodes in. There's no modicum of professionality in that. Only when I say really pretentious sounding things like that do we get some sort of professionalism in this show. But today we're talking about some lesser known wartime stories, some various battles and such that were fought throughout history that you probably didn't learn about. So looking at 4 stories today, we're looking at St. Clair's defeat, the Sandbar Fight, David Fagen, and then our first story will be the Battle of Karansebes. On September 17th, 1788, a group of 100,000 Austrian soldiers set up camp in the Romanian town of Karansebes during the Austro-Turkish War. Now, we all know about the Austro-Turkish War, right? It's one of the most famous wars fought throughout history. Some might say more famous than the 2 world wars. And of course, that's not true. No one's heard of this, right? But this war, by all accounts, was a conflict that erupted thanks to the Austrian alliance with Russia and Catherine the Great, who at the same time had also decided to declare war on the Ottoman Empire, so named because the little hats they wore on their heads resembled a small piece of furniture that you put your feet up on. And that's not true either. I don't know where we get that word from. This sort of alliance then made the Austrians and the Turks de facto enemies, who then just declared war on each other out of formality because European war rules are just so dumb and so weird. Basically like the Austrians aligned themselves with Russia, but separately Russia had already declared war on the Ottoman Empire. So then the Ottoman Empire is just like, oh yeah, well, we hate Austria too, cause blah. And so, yeah, and just everybody's fighting everybody. Well, on the night of September 17th, 1788, a small group of Austrian scouts went out to look for any Ottomans lurking around the countryside. They didn't find any, but they did run into a band of gypsies who were more than happy to sell the Austrians some of their schnapps. And as the scouts drank and had a good time, a group of infantrymen in the Austrian army came up and demanded some of the alcohol. The scouts initially refused, and because they were super hammered at this point, ended up actually setting up a mini fort around the barrels of schnapps that they were drinking from. The two sides then started shouting Austrian insults at each other, whatever that might sound like. And they kind of started wrestling over this bundle of barrels of schnapps. And then suddenly someone fired their gun. And because it was the middle of the night, it's really dark out. No one knew who had actually fired that shot. Soldiers on the infantry side began shouting, "Terci, Terci," indicating that the Ottomans were attacking. The scouts, thinking then that the Ottomans had somehow sneaked up behind them, immediately ran away. And when the infantrymen saw the scouts running away, they then just assumed that, yes, the Ottomans were on the attack and just started firing their weapons into the night air as they retreated. To make things worse, this infantry group was made up of more than just Austrians. There were some Italians, Serbs, Croats. No one could understand each other's weird accents. And by the time all of the drunk, delusional soldiers had arrived back at camp, the commanding officer there also assumed, no one's asking questions here, he just assumed that the Ottomans were attacking and began ordering artillery strikes in the direction that the infantry was running from. So this then, I mean, it's just all one giant chain reaction at this point. The sound of the artillery fire woke up the rest of the camp, who then just assumed they were in the middle of a battle with the Ottoman Empire. And rather than like putting their military training into practice and getting into formation, the entire camp was just running around frantically, randomly firing their guns into any blank area, empty space as they could. They shot at every movement, every noise, every shadow they came across, even if it was their own like ally, because everyone's just running around the camp. And so you're turning a corner. You're not even thinking when you see someone else. You just assume it was an Ottoman attacker and you fired. Holy Roman Emperor Joseph II was actually pushed off of his horse and thrown into a creek during the chaos. And then after a few hours of chaotic shooting, the Austrian army was ordered to retreat. The Ottomans, who were actually nowhere near Karansebes that night, they arrived in town 2 days later, expecting a fight, expecting to have another battle with the Austrians. Instead, they found 10,000 dead Austrian soldiers and nothing else. Like the rest of the Austrian army had just retreated and left. And so the Ottomans took Karansebes. But just absolutely nuts that 10% of this Austrian outfit basically killed themselves or was killed by friendly fire, all just out of confusion and zero communication whatsoever. Fast forwarding a little bit here, not even really, like a couple of years. First, a little bit of background. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris ended the American Revolutionary War and forced Britain to recognize the sovereignty of the United States, including all land east of the Mississippi River and south of the Great Lakes. The Native Americans at the time, who had allied themselves with the British, were also forced to recognize this treaty, which makes a ton of sense because, of course, Native Americans, that's how they, conduct business, is with treaties. However, several of the Great Lakes tribes were not present for the signing of the American treaty, and therefore, felt like they didn't have to recognize this new country that they were now living in. And as you might expect, and as things typically went, the American government didn't really care what those native tribes thought and began selling off tracts of land in what was known as the Northwest Territory, even though it was being occupied by several different tribes who claimed it and owned it. Over the next 6 years, over 1,500 Americans died in scattered battles against the natives as they attempted to move in and take over. And it's like, they're coming and it's like, the government gave me this land. And tribes are like, no, they didn't. This is ours. No one has even talked to us about this. Eventually, two men, John Cleves Sims and Jonathan Dayton, asked President George Washington to call in the military to help figure this situation out. So on October 7th, 1790, a group of about 1,400 men arrived in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Out of that group, Colonel John Hardin led a battalion of 400 men against an army of 1,100 natives. And when Brigadier General Josiah Harmer, who had been placed in charge of the entire American force, learned that the Americans were super outnumbered here, he ran away, leaving Hardin and those troops to fend for themselves. After 3 hours of fighting, Hardin ended up retreating to Cincinnati with 129 fewer men. So he lost more than a quarter of his troops in that battle. Washington, upon learning of this, quickly fired Brigadier General Josiah Harmer and promoted General Arthur St. Clair to lead the troops against the natives. Despite a lack of funds to actually pay these troops, St. Clair amassed an army of 2,000 men, but that number eventually shrank to about 1,500 men and a couple hundred wives, children, and prostitutes that followed the camp as it advanced through Ohio. And I think that's an interesting kind of thing that gets swept up or swept under the rug in a lot of these early war stories, is like, we think that, or, we're often led to believe that just like all of these wars was just dudes roaming the countryside all by themselves. But no, there were women and children and obviously prostitutes with them, because, the dudes that were single or didn't bring their lives along with them, like, they gotta have some sweaty, itchy backwoods romping every now and then, right? Keep morale up or something. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, so it's just interesting that sort of thing just kind of gets left out of history a lot of the time. St. Clair, who himself was suffering from gout, struggled to keep the order in this group of still about 2,000 people in total. And by the end of October, he had lost another 300 soldiers. Meanwhile, the natives, led by the Bacongahelas of the Delaware tribe, the chief was Bacongahelas, and then Little Turtle, the chief of the Miami tribe, and then Blue Jacket of the Shawnee tribe. So there's 3 different tribal chiefs here working together. They had gathered an army of about 1,200 warriors and were tracking St. Clair's every move. On November 3rd, St. Clair set up camp on an elevated meadow, but didn't really bother to set up any defenses, even though he was very aware that the natives were nearby. But I don't know, he just figured they weren't going to attack. The next morning, when the Americans failed to perform their regular reconnaissance patrol, the natives did attack. 3 hours later, with almost the entire group having been massacred, St. Clair gathered his remaining officers and mounted one last charge through the native line. However, they weren't trying to just win this battle. They were just trying to escape, because they had been completely surrounded and they were going to all be murdered and killed regardless. And so they just had to try to line up and bust through the thinnest part of the roadblock that the natives had set up. By the end of this battle, only 24 of the roughly 1,100 people under St. Clair's command returned. At a 97.4% rate. This battle had the highest casualty rate of any American defeat in history, in ever. 97.4% of American soldiers died in this battle. Roughly 25% of the entire enlisted American army at that point was wiped out in this battle. Obviously, St. Clair was forced to resign, but was not given complete blame for this defeat. After a lengthy committee investigation, several members of the Defense Department were blamed for inadequately finding and training capable soldiers. But yeah, just, look, a small battle in an otherwise larger story there, but surprised that this doesn't get talked about a lot more, right? But it's just during that time where, white people are going in and taking what's not theirs, forcing the natives out, and then the natives fight back. And I don't know, just Americans just weren't paying a lot of attention, St. Clair specifically, just wasn't doing a great job leading, wasn't staying organized, didn't perform the right checks. All of a sudden they get surrounded and loses almost his entire army at that point, which was the actual American army. And so, just crazy. So, moving on now, for whatever reason, in the early 1800s, the wealthy Wells and Cooney families started fighting with the more impoverished families in central Louisiana, also known as just everyone else in Louisiana. Fights erupted over various topics, including finances, bad bank loans, fixing votes, and weirdly enough, the honor of a single unnamed woman just got everybody riled up. And they all kept fighting each other. In 1827, Samuel Wells III and Dr. Thomas Maddox finally agreed to a duel after arguing with each other for several weeks. They chose a sandbar in the middle of the Mississippi River since it was outside of any local jurisdiction and thus not subject to any of the anti-dueling laws of the time. And really, it was kind of, the Mississippi River bordering several states. So obviously it's in the middle of the river. So like what state that sandbar is on's, kind of up to interpretation, probably kind of no man's land, especially because if river levels are higher, that sandbar is probably gone. So on September 19th, 1827, these two men, along with their own respective parties, arrived on the banks of the Mississippi to begin the duel. Maddox had recruited local fighter Norris Wright, while Wells had recruited a guy named Jim Bowie, of the famous knife, that Jim Bowie. Wright and Bowie had actually already fought each other once, with Wright shooting Bowie, who was so enraged at being shot that he nearly killed Wright in retaliation, which I thought that was the whole point of a duel to begin with, was to just kill the other guy, but I don't know. But with everyone in place, Wells and Maddox took their position and started the duel. After each man fired 2 shots and missed both times, the two men shook hands and started to go their separate ways because people actually used to make up after trying to murder each other just minutes before. Because look, you think times are weird now. That's how we used to solve our differences. It's like, okay, I challenge you to a duel because you're stupid. And hopefully I kill you before you kill me. And then you both shoot at each other. And then when you miss, you're just like, this is pretty silly, wasn't it? You're not that bad of a guy. All right, I'll see you later. Right? Like, it's so dumb. Some of Wells's posse, however, wasn't about to let a good chance to fight go to waste. Like, they still hated each other and they wanted to throw down. So Samuel Cooney, who had come with Wells, shouted over to Robert Crane that now was a good time for them to settle their own differences since they had also fought each other before. So they got into place for their own duel. Crane fired the first shot, which missed Samuel Cooney, but somehow hit Jim Bowie. Crane then fired again and then hit Cooney in the chest and killing it. Bowie, however, he's pissed off again. And not one to let a bullet stop him, he charges at Crane, who then responded by pistol whipping him and sending him back down to the ground. Norris Wright, another member of Maddox's group, decided to start throwing hands. He fired a shot at Bowie, somehow missing a man half conscious and sprawled out on the sand, but whatever. But instead of reloading and firing his gun, Norris Wright then took out his sword and stabbed Bowie in the chest. However, Bowie's sternum was made out of some weird combination of like titanium, diamonds, and flypaper, because not only did the blade of the sword not pierce his heart or anything, it got stuck in his sternum bone and it got stuck. I was saying it got, anyway, you get it. As Wright struggled to try to remove the blade, Bowie reached up, pulled Wright down to his face by his lapels and right onto his knife, killing him. Upon seeing that happen, another member of Maddox's group shot and stabbed Bowie, who literally laughed at this dude's face, right? So he has just killed a man. He has pulled a man down by the lapels on top of his Bowie knife. And then another guy sees that and not only shoots Jim Bowie somewhere, he also comes over and stabs him, and then Jim Bowie just laughs in this guy's face. This dude is nuts, and I don't think he gets enough credit. Everyone talks about Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett, but Jim Bowie was an insane person. And Bowie, after throwing off the guy he had just killed, gets up and stands up face to face with his new attacker. And everyone else now is watching this. Everyone else is not even fighting each other anymore. They're just watching Jim Bowie hulk out on everybody. Alfred and Carrie Blanchard see what's about to happen. They both shoot at Bowie and hit him in the arm. Bowie, once he gets hit again, turns around and cuts a large chunk out of Alfred's arm with his knife. Carrie Blanchard fired another shot, but missed because apparently shooting people at point blank range is really difficult especially in the 1800s. After a brief and kind of probably awkward moment where Bowie had to think about which man he was going to have to kill, the rest of Maddox's men decided to flee the sandbar. And all of this, right, this entire sequence lasted less than 2 minutes, right? Just absolute chaos going on in this sandbar. So let's recap, right? Because I know I talked a lot and I talked for more than 2 minutes on this, but all of this happens in less than 2 minutes, right? So the two original guys, all right? Samuel Wells and Thomas Maddox, all right? They start their duel. They shoot at each other twice. They both miss. And they're like, all right, we're done here. We'll see you guys later. And then the rest of the crowd's like, no, we ain't. Let's get everybody. And then everyone starts fighting each other. All right. Samuel Cooney shouts at Robert Crane. They shoot, Crane fires his gun. Mrs. Cooney hits Bowie. All right. Crane fires again, hits Cooney in the chest, kills him. All right. We have our first death. Samuel Cooney, he's out. All right. Now, Bowie, he's pretty pissed off that he has now been shot. He charges at Crane, who pistol whips Bowie, knocks him down to the ground. All right. At this time, Norris Wright sees Bowie on the ground. He fires a shot at Bowie, who is just on the ground, and he somehow misses. And they're all like in pretty close proximity together. They're all just on this little sandbar, right? It's not like they're like a half mile apart. They're right there, like from one end of your driveway to the other, that close. And so Norris Wright misses. All right. Norris, instead of reloading, because it probably takes like 15 minutes to reload a gun in the early 1800s, he runs over to Bowie on the sand, stabs Bowie in the chest with his whole sword, and the blade gets stuck inside Bowie's sternum. And Bowie then, with a sword sticking out of his chest, grabs this dude by the lapels, pulls him down onto his own Bowie knife and kills him, throws him off of him. At that moment, another guy that's on the opposing team shoots and stabs Bowie because he's standing right there. Bowie looks at him, laughs at him. Like, what are you doing? And then he grabs this guy and just slices a whole chunk out of this guy's arm. The other dude shoots at point blank range at Sam Bowie. It's not Sam Bowie. That's a basketball player. Jim Bowie. He then shoots the other guy that was standing next to the guy that tried to shoot him to begin with. And at that point, now that Bowie has killed two people to the other side's one that they had already shot, they run away. In the end, one man from each side was dead. Two men from one side, one from the other, was dead. Several others were severely wounded, including Bowie, of course. Robert Crane, who had been one of four people to shoot at Bowie, actually carried him off to get medical help. In the end, Bowie suffered 2 bullet wounds, 7 stab wounds, and then a giant welt on his head from getting pistol whipped. Eventually, news of this event spread all throughout the country and actually was what led to the Bowie knife becoming part of popular culture and really history and becoming a household popular item. Our final story here is of David Fagen, who was born in Tampa, Florida in 1875. He grew up to serve in the 24th Regiment of the U.S. Army, where he was sent to the Philippines to fight in the Philippine-American War, because we all remember that one. This conflict arose when the United States took control of the Philippines from Spain as part of the Treaty of Paris that ended the Spanish-American War in 1898. Look, we think about like how many wars we've gotten involved in over the last few decades. America was like always at war. Like you had the Civil War. Well, let's go back even farther, right? You had the Revolution. And then not long after that's done, you got the War of 1812. And then kind of settled down a little bit. Then we get into the Civil War, right? Like there wasn't any wars going on that we could fight in. So we just start fighting each other. And then you start having the Spanish-American War, which then turns into the Philippine-American War, which then, there's the Mexican-American War somewhere in there. That's probably before then. And then then it turns into World War I. But the Filipinos, who really just wanted to be their own independent nation, just got tired of being ruled by other countries, and they revolted, which is how the Philippine-American War started. President William McKinley tried to say that the war's purpose was to protect the rights and liberties, which is the heritage of free peoples, which was ironic considering the United States wasn't trying to let the Philippines become a free nation. Like, they wanted the Philippines to be part of the United States, or at least the United States territory. On the American side, the war was also fought mostly by black soldiers who, although they were technically free men, they were not being treated the same as white Americans. Even more, it's estimated that as many as a million Filipino citizens died in this war. Fagen, who realized all of this and was tired of being called the N-word and goo-goo, which I don't know what that, I'm not about to unearth that racist, terminology, if it is one, probably is. He decided that he would rather not return to Tampa, and I don't blame him, and defected to the Filipino side on November 17th, 1899. But Fagen didn't just join the Filipinos. He became a guerrilla leader whose sole purpose was to make life miserable for the American troops. After raiding a supply barge, the American media learned of Fagen's story and actually turned him into a folk hero, right? Because media, at least at this time, a little bit more liberal, very unpopular war. They find out this black guy, he's defected to the other side, and they think he's just cool being like Rambo in the jungle, just screwing with the Americans and sabotaging a bunch of their stuff. The American military, who was not at all happy about this, became obsessed with trying to track Fagen down and even posted a large bounty for anyone who could provide proof that he had been killed. In 1901, a hunter named Anastasio Bartolome presented General Frederick Funston with the severed head of a person that he claimed was David Fagen. Funston, who was really just happy to see that someone had done something, paid this bounty out to Bartolome, even though the head was too badly decomposed to positively identify. General Funston was also just really tired of the bad press and wanted to kind of end the story. However, most people kind of they're not sure if Fagen had actually been killed. Rumors for the next few years kind of circulated that the head was just a decoy and that Bartolome was actually on Fagen's side and that the two were working together, hoping to try to get the heat off of him so that he could just go retire in peace. Many people truly believe that Fagen ended up kind of leaving the war, marrying a local woman, and then lived out the rest of his life in the mountains of the Philippines. And that is the end of today's stories. All right, some lesser known war stories in the books, and we can start the official countdown now to episode 200. We've got 10 episodes to go, and oh boy, episode 200 is going to be crazy. All right. No, I'm still undecided on exactly what I'm going to do. But, yeah, man, it's going to be a fun time. So let's recap this episode and see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number one, the Battle of Karansebes was fought Austria versus Austria, mostly because they got very confused and panicked and started shooting anything and everything that moved. And they lost 10% of their army because they freaked out. Number two, General St. Clair lost 97.4% of his men at a battle against some Native Americans because he was a bad leader and poorly prepared. That number also equaled about 25% of the entire enlisted American army at that time, wiped out in one battle. And then number three, Sam Bowie insane person, shot multiple times, stabbed multiple times, and then just laughed at people who tried to kill him because he was clearly immortal, and ended up living for a lot longer. Next week on Our Weird World, we're going to look at some epic fails from history. 3 stories of some people who thought they were doing a thing, thought they were going to make a point, thought they were going to really accomplish something, and then it blew up in their face. Some, as you will see next week, very literally blew up in their face. So we're going to look at the stories of Operation Red Dog, Louis Deathy, and Billy Meyer. These are going to be real silly stories. I'm going to have fun telling them to you. Might be a shorter episode next week, but who cares? It's a free show, whatever. That's it. Thank you all for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird. She got a big booty, so I call her Big Booty. Skirt, skirt, wrists moving, cooking, getting to it. I'm in the kitchen, yams everywhere. Just made a jug, I got bands everywhere. You the realest breathing if I hold my breath. Referee with a whistle, hold his tech. Extendo clip, extendo roll. When yo girl leave me, she need a hair salon. Hair weave killer going on a trapathon. See, I had done more bombs than Pakistan. Dope bomb, dro bomb, and a pill bomb. See, I'm ballin', you in will call. When I die, bury me inside the jewelry store. When I die, bury me inside the Truey store. True to my religion, to everything, I'm too different. So when I die, bury me next to 2 bitches. Ah, Yeezy, how you do it, huh? It's my birthday, I deserve to be greedy, huh? She holding out, she ain't giving to the needy, huh? You go downstairs and fall asleep with the TV on. Y'all been together 10 years, you deserve a menage. Especially if you put that BMW in a garage. Especially if you paid a couple payments on her mama crib. Went to her niece's graduation, man. I hate those kids. Last birthday, she got you a new sweater. Put it on, give her a kiss, and tell her do better. She said, how about I get you jewelry from the West End? How about she hit the West End and get her best friend? Ha! I'm joking. I'm just serious. I asked her, don't be acting like no actress. If we preachin', then we practice. Don't be reaching. Don't be touching. We be in Kanye West Benz. 'Cause I will turn you back to a pedestrian. I show up with a check to your workplace, then hand the valet keys to the Mercedes. Tell the DJ play your song. This come on. What I'm seeing from the back, I can't front on. They ask me what I do and who I do it for. When I die, bury me inside the booty club. Get it, girl. Get it, girl. Get it, girl. I might switch it up and get your girl. They ask me what I do and who I do it for, and how I come up with this up in the studio. All I want for my birthday is a big booty hoe. All I want for my birthday is a big booty hoe. When I die, bury me inside the Gucci store. When I die, bury me inside the Louis store. All I want for my birthday is a big booty hoe. All I want for my birthday is a big booty hoe.